Hey everybody, so as promised, here's a quick tutorial video for the kettlebell deadlift. So before I get into some of the main cues and things to look out for when doing the kettlebell deadlift, I'd like to take you through a couple of little warm-up drills that you can use to kind of also test your ability to hinge properly, which is the core foundational movement of the deadlift of any variation. So if you have some kind of dowel or mop or broomstick or anything like this at home or at the gym, try to use it. Try to do this with that. If you don't, I'll also show you a variation of the same exercise that you can do with a light kettlebell. So if you do have some kind of dowel, I'd like you to start by creating 2 points of contact. So we're going to use, grab it with your right hand to put the contact behind your head. Okay, so that's going to be contact point 1. The second point of contact is going to be right here in your glutes. So I'm going to hold that there with my other hand. Now, with the soft bend in the knee, what I'm going to do is, the cue I like to use is pretend you're going to shut the car door with your butt. So with a soft bend in the knee, I'm just going to hinge my hips backwards, okay, and I'm going to hinge forward and then come back up. So what I'm looking to do is to make sure that I keep those 2 points of contact throughout the entire movement. So if at any point I lose contact at the glutes or the back of the head, then I know that my form is broken down and I am not keeping my back flat. So again, keeping those points of contact and the soft bend in the knee, I'm going to hinge my hips back. Okay, all the way, just work with the range of motion that you have and then come back up. If at any point you round through the low back, you'll lose that point of contact with your glutes. And if at any point you round through your upper shoulders or neck, you'll lose that point of contact with your head. So if you find that you're losing one of those points of contact, it's likely that you need to reduce the amount of range of motion that you have in the hinge pattern and work within the range of motion that you can keep your back totally flat. So that'll be true for when you move to the kettlebell. We'll have to make some adjustments there. So if you're having trouble keeping those points of contact and keeping your back totally flat, just reach out to me and I'll help you work through that. Okay, so that's the exercise with the dowel. Now let's do the same thing with the light kettlebell. So this is only 20 pounds. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it to my chest and I'm going to lock my elbows into my sides so that kettlebell is totally secure. And I'm going to go through the same movement pattern. Okay, so again, soft bend in the knee. So I don't want to completely lock my knees out, and I also don't want my knees to bend first so that it's more like a squat. Okay, so soft bend in the knees. Again, my neck is neutral. I'm bracing, and I'm going to push my hips back first. Okay, and I'm going to try to keep that flat back until I feel it in my hamstrings and my glutes, and then I'm just going to stand back up. So you should feel this in your glutes and your hamstrings. So I'd like you to hinge down to the point where you feel like you're really feeling that pull in your hamstrings and glutes, and then stand back up. And that's sort of your range of motion. So, let's see. So common mistakes are, again, letting your back round or letting your shoulders fall forward. So trying to keep that flat back position the entire time and come back up to standing. So those are the 2 kind of warm-ups. You can do like sets of 10 of this prior to a deadlift warm-up to make sure, like sometimes I have some tightness here and I find that like doing about 10 reps of those hinges helps prime me and get me ready for the kettlebell deadlift. If you're feeling this in your low back instead of your glutes and your hamstrings, please reach out to me. There's a couple of adjustments that we can make to make sure that you're activating the right muscles and that also that you're bracing properly so that you can hinge through the hips instead of using your lumbar spine. So if that's an issue for you, please reach out. So let's get into the deadlift cues. So the main thing let's talk about starting weight. Starting weight with the deadlift is extremely important. I'd like you to think about you're deadlifting every single day, whether you want to or not, in our daily lives. Anytime we go to pick something off the ground, anytime we go to tie our shoe, anytime we do anything that requires us to bend at the hips and pick something up, we're doing a form of a deadlift. So I'd like you to think about some common things that you pick up in your daily lives. A suitcase, a child, a box off the ground, going to tie your shoe, anything that requires you to hinge and pull. Those things are a bag of groceries off the floor. So we do this all the time in our daily lives, and I'd like you to kind of compare the weight that you're using in the gym with some of the things that you normally do. If you tend not to pick a lot of heavy stuff off the ground, it's still important to pick a weight that's challenging. Because here's why. The deadlift requires, in order to deadlift properly, you need to know how to create tension before you go to pull something off the ground. So this is a skill, even if you don't use it now, a skill that you will always be able to use when learning how to pick something up properly. So creating that tension is super important. But in order to create that tension, we need an object that's heavy enough that'll provide us that feedback and force us to create that tension. So if I'm trying to deadlift with a 20-pound kettlebell, it's going to be really hard for me to get into the right position because I'm not being forced to create tension. It's so light that I can just go pick it up like this and I'll likely be fine. Okay, so you really want to pick a weight that's heavy enough that forces you to get that tension here and forces you to get that tension in your upper back so that you can get the most out of the pull and be more efficient with moving that weight. On the flip side of that, if you start out with a weight that's too heavy, that causes you to, at some point, round at the back, or is difficult for you to get in, get off the floor without breaking your form down, then the weight is too heavy. So try and find a sweet spot in there where the weight is heavy enough that it is common with some common objects, like a suitcase or a heavy bag of groceries or something like that. Likely in the 30 to 40, 50 pound range is a really good place that I start most people. Because it's heavy enough that it forces you to produce tension, but it's not too heavy that your form will start to break down. So those are kind of some like starting points that I like to recommend. Usually I don't typically go under 40 pounds. So just keep that in mind when you're picking your starting weight. So let's get into it. So mine might look a little bit different because I am using a kettlebell that's only 20 pounds because it's what I have at home. But the cues are all going to remain the same. It's just going to be harder for me to create that tension. So anyway, starting position. What I want to do is have the handle horizontal to me, and I'm going to stand over it. So you can't even see it right now because the kettlebell should be aligned with my heels. So I don't want to start out with it too far in front of me so that I have to reach for it. Okay, I want to get the most efficient position, which is going to be for me standing directly over it. So I'm going to line that up. I'm going to get my feet about hip width apart, and I'm going to go back to the same exercise that we just did with the dowel. So I'm shoving my hips back, I'm keeping my back flat, and I'm going to have to reach down to the kettlebell. The lighter the kettlebell, the closer the handle is going to be to the ground, which is another reason why it's a little bit difficult to get it down in that position, but I'm going to do my best. Okay, so you might have to bend your knees a little bit more just to get down into that position. So what I'm looking for is shoulders are over my hips, and my hips are over my knees. Okay, I'm not bent up like this in a squat position. I'm not upright in a squat position. And I'm also not parallel to the ground so that my hips and my shoulders are parallel. Okay, so you want to be in a happy medium here. Okay, so now I've bent my knees just so I can get down there. And then I want you to remember the cue that we used last week. I want you to pretend like you're squeezing an orange in your armpits to lock and create tension through your upper body. Another cue I like to use with the kettlebell deadlift is pretend like you're going to break the handle in half. So once you get down and you reach the kettlebell and you have your handle grip on the handle, breaking it in half will allow you to automatically create tension in that shoulder. So hinge back, reach for the kettlebell. Okay, see how I'm still kind of loose here? All right, I could pull here, but my back is rounded, so I don't want to do that. Watch what happens when I cue and create tension, when I break that handle in half and I create tension in my upper body. Okay, now everything is kind of straightened out a little bit. All right, I've got tension in my upper body. I've also got tension here in my glutes and hamstrings. Okay, everything is in a nice straight line. And what I'm going to do here is just stand up. Okay, so I'll show that again. Okay, I'm standing over the kettlebell, hinge my hips back, bend my knees to get down, create tension in the shoulders, break that kettlebell in half, squeeze my glutes and hamstrings, neck is neutral, I stand up. Now, in the standing position, think about standing up tall like somebody's measuring your height. Okay, no need to overextend or move past this point. No need to do an extra movement with your shoulders to emphasize that. Just stand up and lock it out as if somebody's going to measure your height. And then you're going to lower the same way we did with the dowel. Hips first, keeping that tension in your shoulders, flat back, then slowly start to bend the knees so that you can get the kettlebell to the floor. And that's the gist of the kettlebell deadlift. So we went over the starting position, how to set yourself up for success, how to stand up, and then how to lower it back down to the ground. So in the beginning, you can do, depending on how you feel and how that form feels for you, you can do touch and go reps, which means I'm going to get into a good starting position here and set up properly. Okay, I'm going to stand up. I'm just going to lower back down, tap the weight, and come back up for the prescribed amount of reps. If you feel like you're struggling with the starting position and getting your body to create tension and to get comfortable in that bottom position pulling from the floor, I recommend restarting in between each rep. Okay, so that would look like this. I come down, I get set, I go through my checklist, everything feels good, looks good, stand up, come back down, set the weight down, take a minute to reset before I go again. So it's up to you to use whatever method. Touch and go is a little bit easier, but again, if you want to hammer in the starting position and get comfortable there, you can reset in between each rep. So if you're struggling with the range of motion, one thing that you can do to make this a little bit easier is to elevate the kettlebell. Okay, so you can use a small box, you can stack a foam pad, whatever you have at the gym to get the weight closer to you so that I don't have to bend down as much to keep my back flat. That's one way that we can regress this exercise and make it a little bit easier to eventually be able to work through a larger range of motion. So if you're feeling this in your low back, or if you're struggling to get down into that position, that's one method that we can try to help make it a little bit easier in the beginning. All right, so if you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks for sticking with me in this super long video, but I hope that this was helpful. Again, the best way for me to help you is to see what you're doing. So if you're having any questions and you're not sure if you're doing this right, you're not feeling it in the right place, the best way for me to help you is to see a video of you doing this exercise. So I highly recommend either shooting it at home or shooting it while you're at the gym and sending it to me, and then I'll be able to kind of pinpoint which areas that we need to work on and like some ways to sort of improve your form and help you feel more confident with this movement over time. All right, I hope this was helpful. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.